So, okay. Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to this call. And this is a very special call. We have a special guest. Rishad is based out of South Africa, and I've been, kind of following his work for over a year. I've been, kind of trying to glean more wisdom out of him. And then I got this opportunity to invite him for this webinar, and he kind of graciously accepted to be here. I'm going to kind of do justice and kind of give a proper introduction to Rishad. So Rishad is a renowned keynote speaker. He's a leadership expert, and he consults with a lot of leading, kind of Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies. And he has a combination of both business and leadership and coaching experience. And he continues to be part of business as well. And that's a fantastic combination when you're actually dealing with leaders, because he brings in the aspect of business along with kind of core leadership. So he's kind of delivered keynote speeches in various forums. He's been interviewed on TV, in radio, and he's featured a lot of podcasts. And like this interview, he's kind of been on many other webinars as well. He's the founder of Rishad Ahmed Coaching, and he has a team of coaches around the world based out of the UK and USA as well. He's the author of the best-selling book, Mew, A Journey to Divine Love Through You and Nothingness. And we'll probably try and get some thing about the book as well covered in the conversation. He's a certified NLP practitioner. He's a certified master coach. He's the founder and CEO of 8 companies. He has around 85,000 followers across LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. So just wow. Rishad, so happy that you've accepted to be here. And his core is igniting transformation through holistic thinking and wisdom driven leadership, empowering your organization for a sustainable, inspired future. Those are the kind of taglines he uses, to drive his work. So happy that you could be here, Richard. And, thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm going to kick off with the topic itself, which is bringing wisdom back to leadership. So let's start with the basics of why does wisdom even matter? Does it have a place? Is it overrated? Is it relevant?
So first of all, Sriram, thank you so much for having me. I accepted the invitation because you follow my work, and we've exchanged messages back and forth, and you really resonate with what I'm about. And I think you have a good grasp of what I'm bringing to the world, because even though we have all these titles and we have all these accolades, at the end of the day, I think we are, as a people, as a planet, as a civilization, on the cusp of a major change. And I believe that change has already begun, and we need to catch up very quickly. What's very interesting is that technology has moved at an exponential rate. And now we enter into the age of AI, where things happen exponential on exponential. It's something that I studied quite extensively with Tristan Harris, who has a wonderful organization whose whole focus is on empowering people. He did Social Dilemma. Many of you would have seen Social Dilemma on YouTube and Netflix, and now he did one called AI Dilemma. And so he has a huge concern about us as humanity into the future. So having that in mind of where we are as a people, and now we're a global population. Many of us are not aware, but it's the first time that we are a global race. We are all the same, whether we're in India. I can see a lot of Indian names here, and my background is Indian, so I can really connect with that. In my 3rd generation, my family were from Gujarat. I'm very unfamiliar with India, but I love it, and I love the teachings. And in fact, what's very dear to me is the Vedas and the Vedic teachings as well. And then, of course, a lot to do with yoga. India is a very rich fountain of wisdom for us to access. Now, having that in mind, in the modern day context, people are facing many issues in our personal lives. We've got children, even ourselves, the addiction to smartphones and all the rest of it. But More than that, in the work environment where we have leaders taking on an old role, let me give you a bit of a quick background on how we've progressed, right? So we had a pre-industrial revolution where you had a very sort of sane environment of working. You had a very small kind of structures. You didn't have these megalithic structures and mega corporations. And then we had the Industrial Revolution, and primarily led by the big war machines and everything else that was going on, very much in the West, the US as well, and of course India and other countries got dragged into it as well from a work situation. And then we had the turning over. So we realized, you know what, we can't treat people as machines anymore. And then we had people like Simon Sinek, and we had Marshall Goldsmith, and all the rest of the people talking about emotional intelligence and why our people matter. I find it funny, actually, in a very sarcastic way, that people finally matter. Like it was just a revelation that people mattered. So people didn't matter, and then Simon Sinek came on and said, you know what, our people mattered. And if you look at who Simon Sinek is talking to, what's very interesting, he's not actually appealing more to the leaders, even though his talks is about leaders. He's talking to the people. He's talking about the employees, and the employees really resonate with his message. They're like, yes, we want this. We want more, more time and more good work situation. Leadership, on the other hand, are saying, look, we're just come out of the Industrial Revolution. We're still got to put food on the table. We're still got to pay salaries. We're still got to pay all these expenses. And I think there's a mismatch when currently where we are in the whole emotional intelligence. You can see that also how all terms have been changed. The language we're facing a crisis of definitions right now. What we call emotional intelligence, what we call intelligence, is the big one, right? As we enter the age of artificial intelligence, and people forget that the name reveals it all. People are saying human intelligence and artificial. One is artificial, one is real, right? There's a clear differentiation here. So something that's artificial can't be put in line with something that is real, right? So human intelligence needs to be understood, because intelligence is the word, again, that came out of the Industrial Revolution, where what was the main thing? Productivity, efficiency, profitability, all these buzzwords that many of us on the call came out of. But now we're entering a new era when we're talking about the Gen Zs and we're talking about the younger generation, and they're saying, this thing doesn't tickle me anymore, making money. It doesn't really. Now, I don't know how big that is in India. Like in Thailand, we're still back in the days where if you had a job, you count your lucky stars. There's a guy who drives this tuk-tuk, he drives back and forth, up and down from the hotel and back. He's been there for 9 years. And for him, it's he hates his job, but he won't say that, number one, and he won't even think about leaving as well. And so we have quite even though we're on a global community, then what we also have is people that come from the international backgrounds to India, China, Thailand, Singapore, and they're all saying, and they're talking the whole language of emotional intelligence, when companies and leadership is on another level altogether. They're just you should feel very fortunate to be working for them. I mean, I traveled and trained extensively in Mumbai, Chennai. I worked a lot with NIIT, doing courses with them and things like that, and entirely different psychology. So again, I'm laying out a very broad framework, because I think a lot of the times people want to say, well, what do you do? I'm sure you get this too, all of you on the call. What do you do and how can you help me? Right. And so, so you're like, okay, well, I got a bag of peanuts and it costs $1. And that's all they want to know. They don't want to know your story. They don't know why it's relevant. They don't want to know anything. And I'm saying, sorry, I can't do that. You don't want to know the context. That's wisdom. So one of the key points of wisdom is context. Context matters. Context is vital, because we can't take terms out of context. And what's happening in the work situation is now being reflected in the home situation, where we're trying to bring in emotional intelligence to a traditional environment where the roles were very different. Now, whatever that baggage was from the past has to be dealt with from that baggage's perspective. So, for instance, if you had in a home situation, you had a traditional relationship where the man was a breadwinner and the woman was at home, taking care of the children, that's changed. But you can't apply the formula of, okay, well, let's all be empathetic and use all these terms that they don't directly translate over. So I think we know it's something that John Vervaeke talks about, the meaning crisis. So we are right now facing a meaning crisis, what it means to be human, what it means to be in a relationship, what it means to be at work. And we're coming to an age now of this thing called reality apathy. Very famous psychologist talking about how we're developing apathy for life. The reason why we do things is getting very lost. Our work situation is quite lost, and then we go home, and many of the times our home situation is quite lost. So that's a broad context. It's not negative because there's many positive elements that are coming out of it. My time with the young people has been very inspiring. When I say young, I'm talking 20s, 30s, and 40s in that category. I was really impressed with some 20-year-olds recently that I've been meeting, and they have this thing called wisdom. So wisdom is not an age-related thing. Let's understand that. Wisdom is something that you embody within yourself, and an algorithm can't do this. It's very important. So for the mainly Indian population, it's all right there, available if we connect to our past and our traditional teachings. And that's available in Japan. It's available in the problem in Europe for the last 200 or 300 years. We feel that none of our history matters. But if you go back to Plato, to Socrates, to all the ancient Greeks who brought us modern day Western scholarship and thoughts, they all talk about exactly the same concept. So wisdom is about bringing everything in rather than believing that life started 200 years ago on the birth of in the industrial nations of the USA and England. That's a long-winded way of explaining it, and I'll go more, but I just want you to pause you and see what you have to say.
Fantastic. And I've been promoting this idea of human centricity, which is now, like a buzzword. We're having conferences around that and things like that, which is, it's not like it's a new concept, but it's just, I think, the idea that, that the human is at the center is now, slowly starting to pick up. And I think the big difference is that there's more choice. Now people have more choice of jobs, of moving around, and organizations which were used to a certain style of management and using in a way control as the kind of element to keep people in, are now sensing that that's not working. So then it was money and benefits, and now all of those are now matchable. Somebody else can pay you that. Now what else? And that's where I think the human and the culture are going to become huge differentiators. They always were, but I think the focus, and with younger generation having exposure to a lot more information, their sensitivity is higher. They expect, to be treated better. And I think that's certainly something that's evolving. Now, this is a follow-up on the concept of wisdom. Now, when we are talking to leaders, now for them, I'm trying to bring out the idea of wisdom in a way, because many times what people think is, okay, I've had some experiences, some good, some bad, I've had some learnings. And when we talk of wisdom, are we talking about my learnings, kind of being used, or are we talking about something beyond that? And I want you to just comment.
Yeah, that's a very key question, because people are saying, okay, you're talking about wisdom. What is wisdom? Right now, I'd like the people on the call to have a think about what they think is wisdom. And look how that applies. So let me ask the audience a question. Where do you go for information? The answer is quite obvious. Google, the library, you go for information. Where do you go for knowledge? Now, looking at these terms, the difference between information and knowledge. Again, remember, if you don't define the terms according to your definition, then you have to buy into somebody else's definition. And the problem with that is, you can be having a conversation and making a statement, and they'll say, well, that is not being very empathetic. Now, in your mind, you're saying, no, but hold on, my definition of empathy is actually very different. Now, if you look at compassion and empathy is something we'll talk about later on as well, there's a key understanding about that. So let's look at where you go for information, where do you go for knowledge? So in my mind, I would say knowledge, in my understanding, and you can reference it from your own point of understanding, is that you go for knowledge from a teacher, from somebody who will explain it to you in some way, right? So you have the information, you have the knowledge. Then where do you go for wisdom? Who do we go to for wisdom, right? How many people are out there? Can you go to AI, ChatGPT, right? Everybody's hooked on the ChatGPT thing right now. So, and it's useful. Let's not deny it. But then you can't go onto ChatGPT and say, what is the wisdom? Like if you type a line from the Bhagavad Gita or one of the Vedas text, and you say, could you tell me what this means? They're going to give you a literal translation, right? But if you've read any of these sacred texts, they're not meant to be taken literal. That's why context is so important. So having said that, let's define my understanding of wisdom, because I had to look at this very broadly, and so that people understand why it's so important. And because I've defined the landscape, it'll make more sense as we go through. So for me, wisdom is the combination of experience. So your experience and whatever you've got, along with the information or the data that you capture, along with insight or intuition. Something's discarded in many Western and in traditional business environments, intuition, and we're going to talk more about that. Then foresight. Foresight is being able to encompass future variables into it. And then holistic thinking. In other words, being able to encompass all the moving parts along with it. And that's a robust understanding of wisdom in many facets. So as a quick example, you want to make a decision. Before you make a decision, what do? You say, well, I know nothing about it. Google it, right? Google it. Ask Uncle Google, because he's got all the answer, right? So then he gives you something, and then you've got that information. Now you've got to combine that with your experience. This is, of course, related a lot to leadership and in the corporate structures and in the management as well. Experience what's happened in the past. Now, insight, this is where women thrive. So I say women because women are very much in touch with that intuitive side. So they listen to their bodies and they're listening to that feeling. Like if I'm going to go into business with someone, I always tell my wife, I said, please, can you look at them and tell me, what do you think about them? I don't want you to analyze them. Just what do you feel about them? And women and men can develop this as well, by the way. It's not exclusive, but men generally are. So there's the left brain and the right brain, right? So you have your left brain very much structured, and you see how many times that can fool you in your own life. You'll see it over and over again, how when you just rely on analytical deduction, especially from key decisions, that you always can get deceived. It's funny because in the corporate world, they're like, no, throw all the right brain intuition kind of stuff out. Yet, when you get married, when you're buying a car, when you're choosing a house, after you've looked at the data, how many bedrooms there are in the location, all the rest of it, you say, I need to walk into the house, right? I need to see the person I'm going to marry. I need to drive the car. Why are you doing all of that if only thing that matters was statistics? Now, that's the part of intelligence that artificial intelligence in the form of ChatGPT and all the other GPTs has. It's your analytical, logical framework deduction process, and it's very good for algorithmic processing. But it doesn't have the sensory. It can't touch it. It can't feel it. How many times have you bought clothes online and see how odd it is till you go into the store and you're like, yeah, I mean, you do that, and like, I used to work in a clothing store. I'm like, why do they have to touch it all the time? They can see it fine, right? And you're not wearing it either, but you touch the material and you're like, yeah, it'll probably feel good, right? Even sitting in the car. So that's the sensory side, and so that's a very important aspect to realize as well. Our ability to feel, and what's very interesting, what I'd like to bring into the Vedas into this, is that the Vedas talk about our five senses, right? And the sixth sense we have is thought or thinking, right? So we have touch, taste, smell. I always get this wrong, but sound, and then there's one more. I don't know. Anyway, either way, the one more that we have is thought. So thought is one of our faculties for navigating the world. You see, it wasn't the only way, and that's what I love about it. Instead of it saying, okay, because what according to Descartes, the famous philosopher, is that we are what we think we are. So in other words, you exist because you think you exist, right? Now imagine you define relationships based on paper and pen like this. It doesn't work. It does not work. And that's why we have to have a context and a place for where, and of course, the Indian love for technology can be wonderful, but at the same time, the human element is not really nourished. And so you have very much, under Indian context, the management style. And part of that reason is, in fairness to Indian companies, is that it's very much trying to make it up there. they don't have the extra capital, and they don't go to VCs, generally venture capitalists, and huge bank balances. They work with cash. So everything is basically cash driven. So very much of a profit driven revenue. So if you're saying, okay, if I consider the emotional well-being of a staff member, how does that, how am I going to return that investment if I'm giving them X, Y, and Z? The problem with that is they don't understand. Many of them haven't had the discussion that it doesn't mean it's going to cost a fortune and you're going to lose money. In fact, I was with a Chinese manufacturer in Bangkok, and he's setting up this new business model, getting his T-shirt produced for, I don't know what you call it, like $2, right? If you use dollar terms. And I said, but what about your people? And he said, my uncle is starting to change. And this is Guangzhou, China. He said they realize they need to retain their people. So they're taking steps to make sure that people are taking care. This is like mass production. These people being just purely profit driven, and the lowest cost factor is saying our people are very important. So there's no excuse for any company, because a lot of people think, well, it's an IT company or it's a creative agency, their people matter. I mean, here's a factory making T-shirts that cares about their people. So yeah.
All right. So I think, the thing that stood out for me is tapping into emotions and feelings, right? And I feel like corporates have not, kind of tapped into that as a strategy. There's lots of things which happen in the form of events and employee engagement, but it's more for, like fun and well-being. But, I think tapping into emotions and feelings as a strategy is quite critical at this point of time. And one of the things I talk about is, how do you make people feel like, say, when they come for hiring? Have you ever evaluated the tone of the interviewer? Have you looked at their waiting times? Have you looked at the tone of your communication? And all those things matter when it comes to how you make them feel. But in our, in this model that we use to scale, where we're processing tens and hundreds of people, it's all about, okay, are we doing all the steps that we need to do? But in that process, we forgot that there is feeling and there is emotion. And I want to continue on the discussion of intuition. I'm jumping around a little bit, but since we kind of touched on that, how do you really kind of awaken intuition, and how do we differentiate intuition and fear in a way? Because sometimes you get a feeling, but sometimes it's also driven by our compulsive needs or our need to protect ourselves and so on. So would you have any suggestions on how do we kind of really tap into it?
Well, I'm not sure if you know, but I developed an entire course around that, right? So tapping into intuition, it's quite a large subject matter. But in principle, there's a concept or an idea known as infinite intelligence. So we could call that God, we could call that a higher power, higher intelligence, and if we look at it from the Indian wisdom. I don't want to get too esoteric, because then I'll be losing people that are more. I want to speak more leadership. But as we know from our sixth chakra, which is your third eye and your intuitive center, there's a lot can be said about that. But so tapping into intuition requires you. One of the most precious practices that come out of India is Vipassana, which I'm sure many of you have heard of Vipassana. But just being able to be centered and quiet within yourself. There's a wonderful Indian teacher who talks about what to listen to. So when I'm deciding what to do, I throw a question up. It's a whole process. I throw a question into my mind. Now, the rational, logical mind is left brain. It's going to only feed you what it's had from past experience and from what it knows. So nothing new can come out of that, because it's in the machine, right? It's in there. So if I say to you, you're going to have chicken or fish or vegetables, right? Many of the time, or if I'm going to say to you, let's use a vegetarian example, let me say we're going to have broccoli or cauliflower, right? Many of you will have this immediate instinct, because you'll be like, I've had cauliflower before, I remember how it was cooked, but then you haven't tasted how broccoli could be cooked even differently. So you're not going to come up with something new or original from that mind. And I think right now, with the age of AI and algorithms, us as employees cannot be producing material that ChatGPT can do, because a 10-year-old can get on a ChatGPT, as you know, and type the document and produce the result the same as you. So how relevant are you in your workplace? So becoming more relevant means you need to tap into things that algorithms don't have. And what's that? Access to this higher intelligence within you. So feeding into that, the first step is vipassana, and I believe that the process of vipassana, of self-observation. I think we're in an age right now that we know the world, but we don't know ourselves. And so my whole constant reminder is that know thyself, know your own baggage. Most people are like, he's a narcissist, and my boss is this, and my wife is this, and my girlfriend is this. But nobody looks around. And I'm not saying you should criticize yourself, but so I ask my clients when I'm saying to them, they say, oh, my husband's giving me a hard time. I ask them this question. I said, why did you create that situation that your husband's giving you a hard time? And they don't like me very much because well, it's not me that created, they created it, right? I said, but you had a role to play in it. Like, why is it that some people are always in bad relationships? Like a lot of people, a lot of my clients, like, I keep on losing money. So I say to them, why did you create an environment where you always lose money? No, no, you don't understand. I didn't create the environment. Well, if you understand Carl Jung and you look at, even if you look at ancient Indian teachings, and of course, very much in the Buddhist teachings as well, because, you know, Buddha traveled a lot into the area. And then on the other side, teachings from the Sufi teachings as well, they've got amazing things. So awakening the heart is what I'm all about. Awakening the intuition of the heart. If you look at the Greek philosophers that the Western world comes from, Aristotle said the most important organ in the body is the heart. Aristotelian logic is the logic that we use today that created the algorithms that we have today, which is right or wrong, left or right, the 0, 1, the computer, right? Is it on or off? That was the box. Now, the amazing logician and philosopher that came from India was Nagarjuna. Now, Nagarjuna said, hold on a second, because Aristotle's thinking was, is it wrong or is it right? Is it in this box or that box? And Nagarjuna said something so beautiful. He said, well, is he a good man or is he a bad man? Now, you only have the two choices. In English, they call it a dilemma, right? So Nagarjuna talked about the tetralemma. So there's 4 equal propositions that are all correct. He is a good man. Maybe he's a bad man. Maybe he's a good man and a bad man. Maybe he is both. Maybe he's none of them. So now if you put that equation and that question to answering a problem, should we fire the guy? Should we keep the guy? Should we maybe do neither? Now, on the one level, it causes this paralysis because you're like, but that's what I want to bring out in you. Before you're so sure of your decisions, have this time to introspect and go, hold on a second here. I haven't seen all of this because I've judged the person, I've judged the situation, like in our lives as well, right? We lose a job. We're like, oh, that's it. You see, God is upset with me. You know, my karma is coming back to me, all that, right? We do that quick little revision. And then you find another job that's better than the last one, and you go, oh, maybe I was wrong about that. So the whole point with the tetralemma is you pause for a second and go, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, maybe it's not a good thing or a bad thing. You know, and that opens up an entirely new. So that's the holistic thinking that I'm bringing to the Western audience, which is that get out of right and wrong, left and right. And that's where I bring in the teachings of Rumi, who says beyond right and wrong, there is a garden. I'll meet you there. They come together. It's not like this one or that one, or, you know, and then you have this old debate of woman or man, who's better, you know, it's like a leader or employee. We're not in this thing, and the ancients knew about it. And so connecting to our old knowledge and then upgrading that with what we currently have, it's not about discarding. We don't want to get this idea where we're just consulting to the stars and we're saying, right, okay, well, Mercury is over there, Venus is over there. Yeah, we go by Tata, for instance, right? We don't make decisions based, even though people like Tata and all of them will all consult the astrologers, as you know. That's one aspect. You look at the data, you look at many other things as well. So I think we need to realize there's not one solution and there's not one problem. There are multi-layer problems with multi-layer solutions. So you asking the question, how to tap into your intuition, you got to ask why you're asking it, what context you're asking it. And if leaders can assume this vision and someone walks into their office and asks them a question, they know their brains have been upgraded. So I talk about holistic thinking, which is, you know, in the Taoist symbols, you have the yin and the yang. You have the left. You have the left on the. Someone is talking about Nagarjuna in the comments. I haven't seen that, but you know the symbol of the Tao, right? Which is the fish, the black fish with the white eye and the white fish with the black eye, and they're together because they interface with each other. They're not separate. So you have to look at both parts all together, and if you can do that, then you have this holistic view. Siram, I don't know if that answers the question. How
Yeah,
many are?
yeah, yeah.
I
And
don't know if anybody wants to comment or ask. I don't know. Whenever you decide, but if anybody, feel free as well. Up to you, Siram.
yeah, I think maybe we'll come back to the questions in about 5-10 minutes. I just want
Yeah.
to cover a few things. And
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated with the Japanese code of honor, and I know that you've spoken a lot about the samurai system and the Zen and the Bushido system. So what are the ways of the samurai that the modern leaders can actually embody?
Um, look, the samurai warrior is not the only one, but of course, the samurai have a code of conduct, a code of ethics. The Book of Five Rings is a great book to read on the ethics of the samurai. Obviously, we have to contextualize it in the modern sense, but it's very much applicable to all ancient cultures, which is, honor, righteousness, loyalty, honesty, these values that basically all religions and all cultures hold very, very, very dearly. There's a powerful practice that we're going to do a post about this that I just want to share with you, is that it's quite ironic, but the only way to be happy is to think about dying very often. Now, this was what the samurai did, which is one of the most powerful practices. The samurai would wake up in the morning and they would say they would be going out to battle for the day and fighting for their clan or whatever it is, knowing they may not come home at night. So they would go out saying, okay, well, tonight I will probably be dead. I will give my sword to this person. I will give my wife this. I will give that. They're almost doing an account of their death. Now, you say, well, that's very morbid. Nobody, because in the West, you don't talk about death, right? And I remember coming to India and in Africa as well. You see dead people, right? There's people dying. There's sick people around. You don't have to go, like in Europe, you go to London, you think that nobody dies in this place, right? You don't see people. Death is just like hidden away. You're never going to die. So what happens? What's the number one killer of people in the UK? It's suicide, cancer, heart disease, accidents. Combined, suicide's the number one killer in all of the UK. I mean, think about it. Now, I'm not saying it's because they don't see death, but if you know, so my when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I say is I yell and I say, yes, I'm alive. And then I say, thank you for one more day on earth. Just one more day. I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. Now that's the samurai. So they would envisage their death. And guess what? Did they go around going, oh, well, I'm going to die today. You know what? Forget about it. They said, today's the day. Today's the day. I repair that relationship. I have that glass of sake if they were drinking the Japanese rice wine. They would laugh with their friends. They wouldn't be sitting going, I'm not talking to my sister's uncle because he did something to me when I was 13, or they're not in that particular mindset, right? They're like, my wife is Pakistani and they've got this quite a long chain of, this family doesn't talk to that family because that was like, what's the problem? No, because that one back then they did that. I'm like, can't we forget about it? No, they don't want to forget it. We want to forget about it. They don't. It's like, I don't know who doesn't want to forget about it, but so embracing the fact that you're going to die means you're going to live better. So that's one of the teachings. Not in leadership, of course, Siram, I know you're talking about leadership. It's those primary values that navigate this loyalty. Of course, your people have to embody that as well. But as a leader, if you're coming with an authentic approach, and remember, we talk about authenticity like it's some kind of buzzword. Nobody's authentic. Most people, think about it. If I ask you anything, will you give me the exact answer or will you slightly adjust it? So if I say to you, Sriram, for instance, just not putting you on the spot, are you the best at what you do? You won't say yes immediately, right? Because that would be arrogant, right? Even though a part of you may think so. But now, so radical honesty is saying, yeah, I think I'm the best, and feeling nothing about it. Now, who's going to do that? Nobody's going to do that. People will be like, oh, you think you're so good? I'll meet you outside. Let's see how good you are, right? So people are not. And then on the other side, if people are hurt or they're unhappy, and the boss said, everything okay? Yeah, nodding their head, or as Indians not like everything's like, no, everything's not okay, right? But nobody's going to go, you know what? I'm unhappy, right? You don't do in that simple way. So, of course, if you bring a samurai leader out there, the people would have to have quite a shock as well. So it would be this gradual. Of course, if you have that as your principles on how to live, you'd live amazingly well by integrating these teachings of all the ancient warriors. By the way, the warrior class of what's funny about the samurai is that they were taught about being fearless warriors by the Zen practitioners. And as you know, the Zen practitioners were monks, and they basically just around meditating and, you know, collecting money from their bowls and just spending time. Yet they got the fear of death and made them into, and from Zen came archery, the samurai, this you know, all these wonderful, magnificent arts, and Bushido, and then you have jujitsu and all these wonderful arts as well, because of the frame of reference. And that's what I want to bring to the modern day leader, is how to not think outside of the box. There is no box, right? There is no box. There's no outside, there's no inside, there's no outside. If we look at Advaita Vedanta, for instance, if anybody's aware of the whole thing, there isn't this me, you duality. It's just that if you can see it all, even from a company's perspective, if we just limit to the company, it's not the driver and the T person and the CEO, and they're not, I used an example and I said, you know, the guy that washes the car or the girl that washes the car, you think they're not related to the CEO until they scratch the CEO's car, right? And now all of a sudden, who is that guy that scratched my car, right? So there's very much a relationship, but understanding the interplay and interrelationships is really important. And what many people in the developing countries are not aware of is the planetary boundaries we're reaching right now. At the rate of exponential growth, companies, especially large corporations, and this applies in India and everywhere, we're milking the planet for its natural resources. And before, it used to be environmentalists that used to talk about this, but it can't be anymore. 85% of all the topsoil on the planet is dead. We've killed it with fertilizers, which means we've only got 15% of topsoil to feed, at this stage, 7 billion people, right? So there is no renewable resource. Our oceans have been basically fished to maximum capacity. 80% of all the raw material, gold, oil, we're just going further into the oceans. We're doing fracking. If we continue conducting our affairs this way, pretending like these lights that we have in our offices and the internet that we have right now has no resource usage, there's no data being stored somewhere, we've all got to be concerned about that. So ecological, we have to bring ecology, we have to bring sustainability. It's not reserved for, you know, gurus or monks or environmentalists or hippies. It's from the small to the big, we all have to be concerned.
Yeah, I think one of the measures of our success is, what do we gift the next generation? No, not leave them something which they have to struggle with, but really something that can flourish. And I think that's certainly a big, huge, kind of element. We are, I think, with consciousness, probably things will improve, but if it takes too long, then we may not be able to repair the damage that we've,
Yes.
kind of already done.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've arrived at planetary boundaries, which means that if we continue this way, us as a human species will run out. You see all the futuristic movies, right? We don't have that luxury right now. And I don't want to scare anyone, but go do your research and see how far we basically utilized Earth's natural resources. And we are running into major disasters. So it's no longer of, let's see which company can do better than the other. And leaders and employees have to say, oh, we're concerned about this. What can we do about the lights? And it's not just a small thing, it's a big thing. Now, ecology, our emotional well-being is just as critical. Right now with the distraction, because remember something which is very interesting. If companies have harvested 80% of all the world's natural resources, gold, silver, copper, what's left? Do you know what the number one most valuable commodity in the age today is? Your attention. We are in the attention economy. Your attention, every second of your attention is a price tag. You won't believe this, but do the research. Every time you grab this phone, there's companies that are fighting for that attention. So when you go on YouTube and you go on that, every time you give 1 second of your attention, that's all we have left. We've done with the earth. So now your attention is the last known thing that we have available. So if you can't stay, now look at our relationships collapsing, right? Your wife's saying something, your husband, your employee's saying something. Leaders are sitting there going, listen, can you come back later? I'm just sending a quickly email to my boss, right? And the guy's like, this person doesn't get, and then you get the resignation on your table. And you're like, what happened? Well, you happened, right? Because we can't, so, being able to be present and being aware, people were saying, Rishad, no, but this is, what are you talking about? It doesn't make sense. Well, now you see. So I'm saying, talking about wisdom is the next 5 years. Right now, the whole world is, every conference is, Rishad, can you talk about AI and how we're going to put this new software? And I'm like, no, you go have that conversation. When you run out of it and you fired 70% of your best people because you thought AI is going to take over it, and now you're going to go recruit them all back, then I'm going to tell you why wisdom needed to be applied to that. So some companies, and I'm speaking to a few conferences as well, are saying, talk to us about this. You have a point, because we're getting a bit too excited about, let's systemize everything, and HR and all these other type of processes are. But companies, especially in the West, are really listening to this. And I'm hoping places in the East, like India as well, are saying, look, and I know, Sriram, this really appeals to you as well. Now is the time. Wisdom is critical right now, and an overall understanding of wisdom, not wisdom of let's go into the temple and read a sacred text. That's not what we're talking about. It has to be a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old saying, let's be wise about our future. We need to understand that. So wisdom is very important.
Yeah, and I think the smartphone is, what I call the kryptonite, right? It takes away all your power, and then you're wondering, where your time went. Especially now, I'm especially worried about the kids, because that's a place where it's certainly doing a lot of damage to their thought process and so on.
Yeah, and at work as well, Sriram. It's not just it's critical.
Yeah. So I want to talk about compassion and then kind of open it up to kind of people. So could you talk about, because I think one of the issues with compassion, or even, some of these virtues that we talk about, is that at least at a leadership level, the fear is that it makes us soft, weak. And now we are after targets, we are after metrics and results and profitability. And if I become soft, now how do I drive the results that I'm looking for? So there is a genuine conflict that, I don't want to become too soft, but I need, the results as well. So how do we address that? How do we use compassion in the modern context?
So compassion in the context of leadership and decision making is what you're talking about. Yeah. So let's understand that the word compassion has been tossed on its head like a salad bowl. Okay. So first of all, if you look at what compassion and kindness meant in the East, now I'm only going to talk now for China and Japan, but if you go into a Zen monastery and you go in where I've been and you sit for Zazen, which is same as Vipassana, you sit there, and then you start falling asleep, there's a man who will come around you and hit you with a stick, right? Now, if that was the West, they would not call that compassion. They would call that abuse, right? But he's being so kind and compassionate to you. He's whacking you so that you don't fall asleep, so you gain the most out of your practice. One of the ways of the Zen monks, when they talked about enlightenment, there's a famous story. The man came up to him and he says, could you tell me about the nature of Buddha? And the guy hit him on the back of the head, and the man said, and he was enlightened, right? Because it just knocked him out of there. Now, I'm not talking about the physical violence perspective, but so, for instance, I use my children's example, right? Before we talk about the leadership context in this particular way. My daughter says to me, I'm going out, I'm 16, I'm going out with a bunch of guys, nothing's going to happen, we're just going to have a good time. I'm like, red flags. I got 4 daughters, so I know about these things. I've heard this all before. No, we're just going to get, you know what, don't worry, there's a girl coming along, I'm hearing all the tricks that they've tried before. Like, no, you're staying home. Oh, but that's so nasty. You need to be more nicer, more kinder, more compassionate. No, me being compassionate is making sure you don't go out today. How I do it, I don't slap them and sit them in the room. That's where wisdom comes in. And you say to them, and you sit them down, and you put your smartphone away and say, this is for your benefit, and you're going to see the value. Talk from your heart, give them extreme amount of love, and show them. But then you're not compromising on principles and values, which are going to protect them. So that's a very good understanding. We take it into the leadership context. And look, if you say, so if my daughter says, I hate my dad, you see, you have to be okay with that as a dad or a mom. But these days, we want to become friends with our children. I don't know how much it is in the East, right? But like my clients in London, they're like, yeah, but she hates my guts. I'm like, that's good. Because if she's doing whatever she wants, or he, I've only got daughters, so I'm only talking about from a female perspective, right? About a leader, not, see, because a leader who doesn't know themselves, if they can be easily prone to like, oh, they insulted me, so I'm offended. You can't be offended. So you're going to have this robustness about you in your being. So compassion encompasses rules, regulations, and principles by which you govern the entire organization with. And also, if something critical I like to share with everyone here, if you don't define your own way and your own rules of existing, then you're going to be forced to let someone else do that for you. So they're going to probe into your relationships, and you're going to go on Instagram, and a woman's going to say, or a man's going to say, in relationships, you should do this, right? And then you'll come home and tell your spouse, according to a doctor so and so that comes from university so and so, we should all walk around without our trousers on. And then you're going to come home and implement that type of technology or that type of idea because it improves relationships. But so then you're open to anything. So anything you say, and that's what's happening right now in organization, everybody's tiptoeing. Because anything you say women, you say man, you say compassion, you say kindness, you say woman, anything. So what do? So I believe a time's going to come where you're going to have like a list and say, look, safe zone. So if I say something, I say, if you know somebody's heart, you can't get offended by them. If you know somebody's heart, you can't get offended because you know what they mean. Right. Otherwise, we can't have these conversations anymore. We have to have open conversations. So, Surim, I don't know if it directly answers your question, but that's the overall thing.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I want to reiterate over there is that people need to be clear about what matters most for them, and also ask the question, why does it matter? If they can ask those two questions and come to a certain level of where you eliminate, oh, money matters, but then why does it matter? Because it serves some other purpose. And when you are able to clarify the why and get to a space of this is what truly matters to me, then you live life with that perspective. I think it's very profound.
Spot on. I say you have to define where you are. So in any conversation, what is our goal? Because you can get into a whole ego match. But then if we say, so for instance, using a husband and wife relationship or a partner-spouse relationship, simple. What is our goal? To be together. So how are we going to handle this? Right. So we're not going to get to a point where that's it, I hate you, I'm leaving. We're going to say, okay, we're not reaching an agreement here. That's what's up, but our goal has been clearly defined, like you said, and why do we want this? And then we can navigate further. So I'm only confirming what you said, which is spot on.
Yeah. Just talk a little bit about your book, and then we'll open it out to the audience.
Well, my book is called not Mu, it's pronounced Mu, right? So
Mu, okay.
It's okay. Mu is a Japanese word which means nothing. So people say, what is your book about? I say nothing. So it's not the best introduction to a book, but that's all I got. So it's, for me, it's when I say nothing, Mu is a word that encompasses from the Japanese nothingness. Nothingness is very different to nothing. So in my journey through my life, I thought all these things. I had to be a good father and a good husband, and I had to make a lot of money, and I had to buy a Ferrari, and I had to live in Dubai, in Jumeirah Beach, whatever the thing was, right? And it was all collapsing. I got very depressed, and I didn't feel like living anymore. So then I met a coach. I went onto a journey of my own. And he said, but why do you think that's the way? I said, well, everybody thinks this way. He said, no, you think like that. I said, no, but my father taught me like that. And it was one of these things. So I had to unlearn. So the process of letting go of the conditioning in my mind, I unlearned that, and I basically discarded everything that I thought I was. So I became the unconditioned self and say, now, what suits me? What do I want to be in the world? And I wanted to start with nothing. So that's why I mentioned that. Mu means you get to a point where you've unlearned everything. So if I say, who are you? I said, I don't know. What's your name? Don't know. You tell me. And then you don't even know what the color blue is, because now you have what the Zen talk about, beginner's mind. Very famous D.T. Suzuki, a book called Beginner's Mind, on very powerful book about just being brand new and not coming in with any preconception. So you allow people, instead of just saying, okay, they're like this or they're like that, or you always have these assumptions to make. So I'll use an illustration to show you this. So a man was walking in the forest. Another man came up to this man and hit him with a stick. And the man that got hit with the stick, he picked up the stick and he ran for the man that hit him and says, excuse me, sir, I think you dropped your stick. And the people around him said, you idiot, the man just hit you with the stick. What are you hitting him the stick back for? He said, no, the stick hit me. The man didn't hit me. So do you see the differentiation? Because otherwise you're saying he's a bad man. He's not judging the man. Again, taking from Nagarjuna's philosophy, why are you making assumptions? Why are you making judgments? So that led me to my journey, and through my teachings of Zen and Buddhism and exploring that type of thing. Then I went through a journey with Sufism and understanding love. So I came from nothing into love, and that's my whole journey through my life, and that's how it. So what you get out of it? Nothing. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you'll get nothing out of it, which is what you want. Otherwise, you're just full. You know the story of the cup being full. I think that's in all traditions. You can't teach someone whose cup is already full. So when you empty, then you beginner's mind, and everything can become a wonderful experience.
Okay, one last question. I couldn't, kind of resist. Now that you've, kind of researched so many systems and philosophies, is there a specific system that appeals more to you?
You see, I can't answer that because it would contradict what I'm saying. All of it together.
Yeah.
There are treasures. I mean, I was raised in a very sort of traditional Muslim background. So I was like, okay, well, this is all. And so part of that journey was like, okay, well, let's put the Muslim thing aside. Now, before anybody jumps to any conclusions, I'm just putting everything aside. I'm not saying I'm not this and I'm not that. So, but hold on. Let's look at the Bhagavad Gita. Let's look at the Vedas. Let's look at the text from Buddhism. Let's look at the Jewish text. Look at, and I mean, they were all saying the same thing. They were all saying the same thing, that get out of your head, get into your heart. I mean, if you read the Tao Te Ching, if you haven't read the Tao Te Ching of Lao Tzu, it's a phenomenal text. And if you want the shortcut, then you get my book, because I quote a lot of it. And you read that, it's like reading the Bhagavad Gita, or reading like the Quran, or you're reading the Bible, you're reading. So I'm not saying all of them are right, and I'm not saying all of them are wrong. I'm not saying all of them, but my God, to limit yourself to one particular teaching is not required. I'm talking about knowledges. Now, say you want to go on a journey of enlightenment, then I truly believe you need to stick to one path. You can't go and say, I'll become enlightened by reading this text. Enlightenment is a process of you, and in fact, the word is very appropriate. You're lightening the load. You're taking out stuff. You're enlightening. So the moment you know nothing, you're enlightened, right? So that's what it is. So you can't be getting more knowledge. That's not what an enlightened person is.
Very nice. That's the first time I'm hearing that definition of enlightenment. That's very nice. Okay, now I'm going to just open it out to the audience and, kind of let them comment and question anybody who wants to ask.
Sure.
See chat if there's. Yeah, go ahead, Akansha.
Hi, Sriram. Thank you very much for hosting this and organizing this session. I've been meaning to attend since a very long time, but because of the time difference in London and India, it was just difficult. Rishad, hi, good morning from London. And just a phenomenal session, I would say, on wisdom. It's one of my most important topics to study, to learn from mentors, coaches, and leaders. I have one question, Rishad. When you say the boundaries of planets, and when you talk from the holographic perspective, is it a particular energy, or have you studied about planetary perspectives and how it designs the human psychology, and how we can use that to understand our strengths in this world when it comes from wisdom, intellect, discipline? Like Saturn brings discipline, Mercury is intelligence, Jupiter is abundance, wisdom, mentors. Did you actually create an awareness for yourself? When did it start? How do you apply? Please, I'd just like to know something more about it.
Unfortunately, that's not a field of expertise of mine. I wouldn't be able to. But having said that, I have read a little bit about it. But I mean, I would say absolutely. There's none of that can be discarded, and very relevant. There's so much to be gained from that. But I'm sorry, when it comes to the planets and to the to the astrology, not my field of expertise. But I definitely think it's very valuable.
And have you been I wouldn't say using, but have you ever used that self-awareness tool to know about yourself, your strengths?
My idea of self-awareness is the Zen practice of discarding everything of knowledges out there to get to know the true self, which is what I talk about in my book. The unconditioned self is the eternal self, or I suppose they would refer to that as the Atman in a way. You could, I'm using very rough analogies here, so I don't want, because I don't claim to be an expert on all these different texts. So for me, I know not much about most things, so I really wouldn't be able to tell you a lot about that field, unfortunately.
Okay, but your perspective really is very different from me. It's new, so I'm definitely going to buy your book for sure. It's Moo. I've just Googled about it, and yeah, I'm just on my way to read it.
Yeah,
So thank you very much for the session.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's the unlearning for me is the key. Just like basically, if you can learn to be a childlike mind and it's a fresh like mind, the whole world becomes this oyster of exploration. And I can sit and listen about the planets and be just intrigued. I think, one of the powerful things is, can you get your spark in your eyes back, where you're just sitting and you're like, wow, is this the kind of universe we live in? The problem is in the information area that we live in right now, we're like, yeah, I know about that. I read that. Yeah, I know that. And you can't really impress anybody with anything these days, right? And I think
agree.
we should be unlearning so that you're just looking at the moon. I remember this man went on a meditation and he said, I just saw the sunrise and I was crying like a baby. It was the most beautiful feeling just from the sunrise. That's all we needed. We didn't need to find out any mystical kind of, thing. Just looking there and being one with the sunrise. I mean, to me, that's eternal bliss. That's what all the teachings are bringing you to. I think anyway.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Go ahead, Sejal. Sejal, go ahead with your question.
Thanks for hosting this session, Sriram. Rishad, it's been wonderful listening to you.
Thank you.
My question is, I believe that as leaders, introspection is extremely crucial for all of us to go through on a regular basis, even in personal life, but professionally as leaders, it's extremely important to know, as you mentioned, baggage. It's very important to be aware. How do you cultivate that culture of introspection or the importance of wisdom within your team members?
Well, introspection and wisdom are interrelated yet not interrelated. You could say, but let me give you a brief, if I understood you correctly. So, we have to, in my previous interview, I said the question was, how do we inculcate in our people the sense of self-awareness? What you're talking about, introspection. I said, if the leader themselves or the person who's been in charge of others are not self-aware and they're simply dishing out orders, then, or like, how you doing? Everything okay? You getting enough money? You got a family okay? Well, you're just wasting time. You're just joking around, right? So so they were saying, you have to become introspection, become internally aware, self-aware. This is the age of self-awareness, and that's where all the teachings and from yoga, from Zen, from all this, be able to just sit and observe yourself. Blaise Pascal, very famous French writer, said, all man's or women's human beings' problem stem from the fact that they can't sit alone in their own place of silence. They can't. Right? So if you can sit here and be silent within yourself, and then another human being is in front of you, you're actually seeing yourself through them. So one of the practices I do with my clients, I say, go to a busy place and watch people, and watch how you're thinking about those people. Not how those people are. What are you thinking about them? You're thinking, oh, that guy's from England. Oh, that guy, I think he lost a job. That guy looks a bit arrogant. That woman's, it's all you. It's got nothing to do with them. It's your projection. So we're projecting onto the world and we have no self-awareness. I don't know if that directly answers your question, Sajal, but how to do it is a process. And I'm sure you work with, I'm guessing you do some kind of work of that nature as well.
Actually, no. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I handle the legal for a corporate.
Okay.
But I tend to have these conversations with my team. In fact, this was one of the topics. Self-awareness was a topic at lunch today. And I was just curious because a lot of times I hear my teammates complaining about the factors which are not in their control within the organization, poor management, poor decisions, poor that, poor this. And I often point that and bring it to themselves. And I try to bring their attention to how they are perceiving or how you are not able to appreciate the privilege that you have, and take advantage of what is being given to you. So I just wanted to understand a little more from you as to how do you inculcate that as a culture? How do you condition?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. So look, that's not an easy one, and if you're not being given that position, you're going to be hated. That's the truth. So easy. So
That's
number one. Number two, you can only do that if somebody's willing to want to change that. So what we have generally is entitlement syndrome. I don't know
yeah.
if you heard of entitlement syndrome. So I remember once I was with my coach years ago, and he said to me, Rishad, what's wrong? You look so bothered. And I said, this guy was 2 hours late. I waited 2 hours for the meeting. Can you believe it? And he said, he was late. But why are you doing this to yourself?
Yeah.
He said, then he asked me this question that really upset me. He said, who the hell do you think you are? And I said, how dare you ask me that? He said, who made you God that he needs to be on time? I said, but that's not how it is. This is a professional. But it was a lesson. Now, if I didn't feel entitled, I'd be like what you're saying, at least you have a job. Well, at least he came 2 hours later. Now, nobody wants to look at the world like that. We want
Yeah.
everything bang on efficiency, and we deserve it because somehow we were born as this, that, and the other. And so that humble approach and saying, at least that must be balanced at the same time, because it's not to say that you're not significant, but at that moment when, say, for instance, you're having an argument, you'd be like, okay, but at least I have a relationship with this person. Let me just calm down and appreciate the fact that I have. But look, you can't do that. I can if I'm appointed as the coach or as a trainer. You'd get, like, if you offer unsolicited advice, which most of the time is correct, especially when you're hitting the ego, you become I've got many people that hate me, by the way, previous clients as well, that have said, no, I don't like Rishad, because I say to them, well, guess what? After all my professional analysis, you're the problem. They're like, I don't like you. I don't, well, okay, go somewhere else. I'm not gonna tell you why everybody needs to change. You change first. So,
Thank you. Thank you for a lovely session.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
I
Thank you
think,
for joining.
on that point of self-awareness, I think the first thing, Sejal, is the intent. If people have an intent to become self-aware, there are many ways. What you find is that, that intent itself is missing. That's where the mindset and wisdom and all of that come into play. And sometimes it comes from problems. So when you then encounter a problem, then you're forced to introspect, because then you don't have a choice. So I think that's one of the ways to look at it. Thank you, Rishad. Any words before we sign off? Anything that you want to close, you leave the audience with?
Yeah, the one thing that I want to say that I find that we're not doing now, I don't know if it does apply as well in the teachings of yoga as well. Many of us are not breathing anymore. We're stopped breathing. We're shallow breathing. You see, there's one thing that you should do if you're working in front of an office, in the desk, in front of the computer, become aware of your breathing. And the out breath is so important. You see, the plants all day, they're absorbing all this carbon dioxide, or converting it into oxygen. At night, they all breathe out. The ocean, it exhales. The whole planet exhales. And human beings, because of COVID as well, people wearing masks, people are even scared to breathe, like when they're around. I noticed myself, I'm on the train going, I'm like, what are you doing? Because I don't want to breathe too deep. Maybe I'll catch something. But this is getting a bit, what ends up happening is that we're just, and that activates brain overthinking. So when you breathe deeply, you take just a deep breath in and a deep breath out, it activates your vagus nerve, and all your energy goes into your belly, which is grounding you to the earth, because we're floating like this. When people say you lost their mind, this is what's happening, because we're breathing shallow and we're all in our heads. So the whole point is to return back to the deep breath through the belly and rooting into the ground. Simple practice, but breathing through the belly and through the ground it's required in the workplace, not when you go to the yoga studio. You can do that in a yoga studio as well, but at work, connect with your breath, because your breath connects you with presence. And when you're connected with presence, you're connected with awareness. And you're not going to get this from pharmaceutical companies. Pfizer is not going to be marketing it as the next health product out there, because you can't make money out of it, right? But breath is free. So take advantage of it and breathe as much as possible. I know it's maybe doesn't, but that's a bit of wisdom from experience for me, that breathing is really important as well. So Suram, thank you. And thank you all of you for joining as well. I appreciate you making the time, and I hope you got some value.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll be putting it up on YouTube. We'll also be putting up snippets of this on LinkedIn from time to time. So please do, kind of follow it and follow Rishad and buy his book. Thank you again, Rishad, for being here. Appreciate it. Very grateful.
Thank you so much, Hiram. Thank you, everybody.